Hi guys, hope everybody had a good day. I'm about to read chapter 19. My two older kids are getting ready to head to bed, but you might hear them playing in the background. I asked them to be quiet, but we'll see. Chapter 19, In the Dark Corridor. The word ladder is dark, dare, dire, wire, wife. A painting, one of three, of Ravenna Falls that Elizabeth had admired 2 days before, slid down the wall just behind Marcus Q. Himes and his wife and struck the varnished floor with a crash that echoed loudly in the vast room. The woman called out in surprise, the couple wheeled around, and in that moment Elizabeth dashed away unseen. 10 minutes later, when she was sure the Himeses were gone, she returned to the portrait gallery, and after cleaning up the mess of Ravenna's broken frame as best that she could, put the scuffed and flattened origami bird in her pack. She was about to leave to meet Freddie when she stopped to study the wall of portraits. She wanted to figure out just where the Himeses were standing when they had spoken their strange words, and it seemed to her, as she recreated the scene, that they had been right in front of the paintings of Norbridge and his twin sister, Gracella. What were they doing talking to the paintings, Elizabeth thought, and what did they mean when they said they found the girl? It all left her with an uneasy feeling. She began to leave, but then examined the painting of Nestor Falls again. He was seated in front of an enormous bookcase filled with so many books that they dominated the picture, at least as much as Nestor and his wife. The book with the coded message sat on his lap. It all seemed so strange to her. From her backpack, she took out her little notebook and a guide for children, which she'd brought with her after deciphering Freddie's second clue. She made a few attempts at discovering the key word by trying first Nestor and then Lavina, his wife's name. Neither worked. Next, she tried the names of their children, which she found in an adjacent portrait, Edgar, Nathaniel, and Ravenna. Again, no luck. She studied the paintings, examined Nestor and his wife. There was a secret here to solve, but she couldn't figure out how to get at it. As she closed the book, she noticed on the page, the front where she'd seen the shiny letter T the day before, the letters TH in the exact same glittery silver print. That's strange, Elizabeth thought. There wasn't an H there yesterday. There's no way I could have missed that. She shifted the book back and forth, examined the page from different angles to see if the letters moved in or out of view or if the H disappeared. But the TH remained in the center of the page, clear and bold. It hardly seemed possible, but she felt she must have somehow only seen one of the two letters the day before. I don't get it, she thought. She frowned at the book as she returned it to her backpack, and then flustered, she left the dim hall to find Freddie. It was time to see what kind of success he'd had with the scavenger hunt. Over lunch, they compared notes. They showed what they'd found and praised each other's clues and hiding places. Freddie laid the items Elizabeth had hidden for him on the table. Beyond the cookies, a quarter, and the brochure from the lecture, there was also a pack of juicy fruit gum. A clean silk handkerchief Elizabeth had found in her wardrobe, one of the paperbacks she'd brought with her along with a note that said, "Please return," a commemorative spoon from the 1974 World's Fair that Mrs. Trumbull had given her, and a few more odds and ends. Elizabeth showed Freddie the stash of items that she'd found. Aside from the map, the flourish and the rubber ball, there was also a bottle of soap bubbles, a set of hex wrenches, 2 I'll tell you a joke coupons, a paper bag with some oranges in it, and along with a few more things, the squashed origami bird. "What did you do to the bird?" Freddie said, and Elizabeth explained the strange scene that she had seen with Marcus Q. Himes and his wife. They were standing in front of the paintings of Norbridge and Gracella and talking to them. "Yeah, that's what I said." And saying that something was about to happen, that there was a girl that they'd found. The more she thought about it, the more it seemed that the couple had been looking at Gracella's picture. Okay, well, get this. When I was in the library, Norbridge was in some sort of argument with them. Did you hear what they were talking about? I kind of got close enough without making it too obvious, but all I heard was something about Marcus asking if he could buy some of the library books. Buy them? Why would he ask that? No idea. But Norbridge was telling him absolutely not, and they got pretty mad at each other as they talked. Nothing about stealing books, though. That's all I heard before I took off. Something's going on, Elizabeth said. Marcus and his wife brought a big crate to their room, and they don't want anyone in there. They're also looking for something in the library, and Marcus told us Norbridge steals books. And then Norbridge is going to the library late every night to check on something? Freddie drummed his fingers on his laptop, which sat on the table beside his plate. I admit it all sounds pretty weird. We should keep our eyes on Marcus and his wife. I don't know. This is like the book I once read called Swallows and Amazons, where the kids start to figure out, you read a lot of books, Freddie said. He pointed to his temple and narrowed his eyes. Come on, I'm not making any of it up. You even saw Norbridge arguing with them today, and I saw them actually trying to converse with a painting. Plus, what about Norbridge's trips to the library at night? Something is definitely, and no doubt, absolutely going on. Let's not worry about the Himes guy and his wife for now. Let's just figure that they're playing some sort of creepy game or something. Elizabeth curled her lips. We can let them go for now, she said. But if I see Norbridge heading to the library again tonight, it will be time for you and me to put Operation Sherlock into place. Freddie rolled his eyes. I don't know what you mean by that, but you really do read too many books, you know. Okay, Elizabeth said. We'll start looking into things. Freddie sighed. Okay, he said, agreed, but I do not know what I'm getting myself into. At 11 o'clock the next evening, after Elizabeth had indeed seen Norbridge head to the library late on the night of the scavenger hunt, Freddie and Elizabeth were in room 213, waiting. Elizabeth was standing on a chair and looking through the peephole again, while Freddie was trying to distract himself by sitting on her couch and reading a guide for children. He kept looking up to see if she had changed her position. You're making me nervous, he said. Elizabeth had her face pressed against the door. Shh, she said. He's bound to pass by any time. But we decided we would just go to the library after a while, Freddie said. Why do you have to watch for anything? I just do, she whispered. Go back to studying about walnut shells. I'm reading your ancient book, actually, Freddie said, pushing up his glasses. Someday, when I'm inventing an energy source that will save the world, you'll remember how you knew me here at Winterhouse. Why don't you try another keyword for Nestor's code? Maybe big head or something? Seriously, how many words do you think we've tried now? Elizabeth pulled her face from the door for a second and peered off quizzically. Between the two of them, they had worked through so many possibilities over the last 2 days. Flourishing, mountain, pool, skis, books, lobby, sled, ice, snow, along with every name in the Falls family that might have been used. She had even lost track. They had even begun trying words at random like cornpone and Timbuktu and migraine and chowderhead and halitosis and a few unusual names out of pure desperation like Zelda and Mojo, Binky, Rapunzel. None of them had worked. At least 100, Elizabeth said, returning to her watch. Freddie frowned. Hey, he said, while we're waiting, have you read the ending of this book? I've read the whole thing. She'd been wondering at times throughout the day about the strange silver letters at the front of the book and had examined them a few more times. They remained a puzzle to her. Listen to this, Freddie began to read aloud. And so our journey ends. If this book has helped you learn how to have plenty of fun, my work has succeeded, at least halfway. Better still would be if you have understood how to put a smile on the faces of others. If you have, my work has succeeded by about 9/10. If you've only partially learned how to have fun, but have learned almost entirely how to make others smile, then my work has succeeded by something in the neighborhood of 13/16. If you believe you know how to have fun, but cannot successfully make other people smile all the time, my humble volume has perhaps been only something like 17/25 successful. Other combinations you may work out for yourself. Above all, remember, the most important things in life have a key. Keys unlock all the secrets for living a life you can be glad of. Don't ever forget that. Look for the key. Doesn't that seem like a really bizarre way to end a book? Freddie said. Well, I think the whole book is bizarre, Elizabeth said. Why would the ending be any different? A thought came to her that it wasn't right of her to talk about the book in this way, to just dismiss it so. No, Think about it, Freddie said. The author makes a big deal about codes in the book itself, and then he ends by talking about keys and unlocking secrets. Does it seem to you that he's trying to make some kind of a point? Or maybe it's just the way he writes, Elizabeth said. I don't know. I just think it's more proof that the book is connected to Nestor's painting somehow. But how could it be? Freddie said. I don't get it. It's an interesting book for sure, Elizabeth said. A thought came to her. Hey, look at the page near the front with the TH in silver letters. I can't figure out what that means. Freddie was silent for a moment as Elizabeth continued to look through the peephole. I don't see what you're talking about, he said. Here, I'll show you. She put a hand out, and once Freddie had given her the book, she kept one eye at the peephole as she opened to the page near the front where she noticed the silver letters. When she saw what was written there, though, she almost allowed the book to fall to the floor. To Elizabeth's amazement, the word "the" was now at the center of the page. What in the world? She said, pulling her face away from the door. That's impossible. What? Freddie said, staring at the page. I don't see anything. The word "the" in big silver letters? Elizabeth said, pointing to it. You don't see that? Freddie peered at the page again and shook his head. I just see the author's name and the year. Elizabeth held the book up to her face and studied the page carefully, wondered if perhaps the letters might shimmer in and out of view or maybe were written with some special sort of ink. That's the strangest thing, she said. Yesterday it was just a TH, and the day before it was just a T. You don't see it? Freddie took the book and moved it around, just as Elizabeth had, trying to examine it from various angles. He shrugged. Nothing, he said. The patter of footsteps in the hallway sounded, and suddenly Elizabeth returned to the peephole. Her arms and legs went stiff. There he is, she whispered. Norbridge, there he is. You saw him? Freddie said. She backed away from the door and stepped off the chair. I did. Let's give it about 10 minutes. She pointed to the book Freddie still held. I don't understand what's going on with those letters in there and why you can't see them. Freddie shrugged and handed the book to Elizabeth, who opened it up and examined the page again, shaking her head and frowning. Maybe we can figure it out later, Freddie said. He seemed to want to discuss something else. You know, I've been thinking, and I don't know if I want to go actually spy on Norbridge. Elizabeth set the book down. We went over this before. It's not spying, it's figuring out a puzzle. As she said the word, she had a feeling she's being a touch too bossy. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but we agreed to investigate, right? Freddie took a piece of paper from Elizabeth's desk and began to write on it as she paced the room, her mind still puzzling over the strange letters in the book. After a few minutes, during which neither of them spoke, Freddie said, Word ladder time. Elizabeth glanced at the clock beside her bed. This has to be really fast. Look is the first word, Freddie said, ignoring her. As in, 2 young spies in room 213 are probably making a mistake by wanting to look into things in the library. I get it. Keep going. If you fix dinner from scratch, you like to cook. And if you're a chicken, you live in a coop. And if you're that same chicken, someday someone is going to give your head a chop. And if you go to the store with a credit card, you intend to shop. And if you are a nearly world-famous inventor who isn't sure it's the right thing to do to go spy on the owner of Winterhouse in the library late at night, you might tell your friend that the two of you should not stop, Elizabeth said. She gave out a groan of exasperation. Freddie, we agreed. He examined the paper in his hand. I know, still. 5 minutes later, Elizabeth and Freddie walked silently down the corridor and then found themselves standing in front of the library doors. They each looked through a window on either side of the doors, but they could see nothing within, no flashlights, and no one moving about. What should we do? Freddie whispered. It doesn't look like anyone's in there. We need to go in, Elizabeth said. Maybe we should just head back to your room. Don't be a scaredy cat, Elizabeth said as she reached for the door handle. Let's go inside. Then we can see what he's doing. Very late to be visiting the library, someone behind them said, and Elizabeth nearly screamed. When she turned around, the woman in black, the wife of Marcus Q. Himes, stood staring at her and Freddie. "You scared us," Elizabeth said, but the woman dressed in black, just as she'd been on the other occasions Elizabeth had seen her, merely stood looking at her with a smile so thin and tight it seemed she was proud to have frightened them. Her eyes were piercing. "We haven't actually met," the woman said, "though of course I saw you on the bus the other day. My name is Selina Himes. I believe you've met my husband, Marcus." Do you know her?" Freddie said awkwardly. He was staring at Selina Himes, though it wasn't clear to whom he was speaking. "Do I know Elizabeth?" Selina said quickly. "I do." "The reader," she added with a strange nod at Elizabeth. We couldn't sleep," Elizabeth said, "so we came down here." She felt tongue-tied. "She can't scare me," Elizabeth told herself. "I couldn't sleep either," Selina said. "So I thought I'd come here and see if I could find a book." She smiled, her eyes gleamed. "You know, I thought I heard you say something about wanting to see what he was doing. I wonder who you were talking about." Selina glared at Elizabeth, waiting for her to speak. Despite her nervousness, Elizabeth looked more closely at what Selina Himes was wearing. Under her black jacket, she wore a satiny black dress and a vest with strange patterns on it, something that reminded Elizabeth of the hieroglyphics that she'd seen in pictures from ancient Egypt. "It was nothing," Freddie said. His voice was quavering. "I just wanted to talk to Norbridge, that's all." Selina looked past them through the glass windows. "And he's in there?" she said curiously. And then she threw her head back and gave out a musical little laugh. "Well, I would be careful." She held up a hand and pointed vaguely with her thin finger. "About what?" Elizabeth said, prepared to hear the same story about Norbridge that Marcus had told her. Selina pursed her lips. "I'll tell you something, because it's clear the two of you are smart children, and it concerns me that you are looking for Norbridge at this late hour." "What concerns you about that?" Elizabeth said. She was beginning to become more annoyed than alarmed. "Do you mean the story about him being a book thief?" Selina Himes inhaled deeply, but she didn't seem flustered at all by Elizabeth's words. "I would suggest that you be careful around him. I'll just leave it at that. Just be mindful. I'm aware of some things about him." "He seems totally fine as far as I can tell," Elizabeth said. "Yeah," Freddie said, his voice steady now. "He's like the nicest person I know, and I've known him for a few years." "Sometimes you can't tell with people," Selina Himes said. "I'd feel awful if anything happened to you, like with his wife. The only woman here to die so early, the poor dear. Very, very strange incident. Suspicious, actually." Elizabeth felt something like a shock of electricity go through her. She had to admit it had been odd to her that Norbridge's wife seemed to be the first woman at Winterhouse who had not lived to 100. "What are you trying to say?" Selina Himes leaned forward. "I'm saying be very careful here at Winterhouse." Her final word ended with a low hiss. Elizabeth glanced behind Selina Himes and into the empty corridor. "Well, we should probably get going," she said. "The doors are locked anyway." She looked to Freddie. "I guess we struck out. You can find Norbridge tomorrow." She reached to her neck and clutched at her pendant. Selina Himes stood silently, her eyes bright. It seemed she was not going to move. "My dear," she said. She craned her neck and looked at what Elizabeth was holding as though she'd spied a mouse in her hands. "What sort of beautiful necklace do you have there?" Elizabeth slowly turned the pendant over. "It's just a necklace I like to wear," she said. "My mother gave it to me." Selina Himes looked like someone who had just discovered a rare flower. "Very lovely," she said in a warm voice. "And such a coincidence." Her voice became cold. "My mother used to love necklaces too." And just as she reached her hand out as if to pluck the pendant from Elizabeth's neck, the library doors opened and there stood Norbridge Falls and Leona Springer. "What in the world is going on here?" Norbridge said as Selina Himes pulled her hand back. Oh my, that was eerie, wasn't it? So that takes us to chapter 20. Chapter 20 is called A Nearly Forgotten Story, and the word ladder for that chapter will be story, store, stare, stars, seers, hears, heirs. So can't wait to hear what happens in chapter 20. Good night.